Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everyone who's joining us, whether live or on catch-up. My name is Paul Lockley. I manage our EMEA business at Device Authority and also lead our global strategy on automotive. We have a great webinar for you today, exploring how regulation is reshaping automotive trust. With me today, I have presenters from both inside and outside of our organization who provide insight and security expertise on the challenges organizations now face. Seem to have fallen off the screen there. Okay, now we're back.
We're back.
Wrestling with of regulatory enforced resilience, and more so than the automotive industry, as it joins the dots from mechatronic to digitally enabled. This is just an engineering issue, but connected vehicles now rely on thousands of cryptographic keys per vehicle. These are generated, stored, and distributed across dozens of suppliers. They are accountable for security and compliance. These control the keys. This creates a structural bottleneck for scale, compliance, and security. So to discuss the topic of structural constraint a little further, I'd like to now hand over to Amit Rao, who manages our business and consulting for the India region.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So Paul just gave an introduction about why OEM cryptographic fragmentation is now a strategic risk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the structural constraint here. So let me start with some observation based on our interactions with a number of automotive OEMs, and this across passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, even two-wheelers, and across regions. Now, as a common theme, what has emerged really is that the modern vehicles, whether we talk about the software-defined vehicles, autonomous, semi-autonomous, electric, are incredibly complex digital platforms, right? And a single vehicle today may contain hundreds of ECUs, telematic controls, gateways, onboard chargers, vehicle-to-cloud infra interfaces, and each of these components really need to authenticate, communicate securely, and receive trusted software updates, right? And to enable that, every one of these systems would really depend on a unique cryptographic identity and keys. So at the end of the day, the entire security architecture of the vehicle really boils down to the integrity and the governance of these cryptographic keys. And really this is an important shift, right? So key management is no longer a background IT activity. It's kind of become a core safety and operational and even regulatory requirement for modern vehicles. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, if you look at the way it's being done, the traditional model, as we call it, the tier one supplier independently generates, stores, and manages cryptographic keys for their components. And this really creates a fragmented PKI infrastructure across the supply chain. And why fragmented? We're talking different CAs, we're talking of different algorithm, key lengths, the way the keys are stored, and the operational maturity of each of these tier ones, right? So this slide here really illustrates what we call as the fragmentation trap, right? A situation where the cryptographic control is distributed across multiple suppliers and system. And in such a setup, OEMs struggle to execute a coordinated incident response or perform a fleet-wide key rotation or maintain compliance-ready audit trails, right? So there are quite a few constraints here, but let me pick up top 5 that I've noted down. So one is the supplier siloed PKIs, and a single vehicle manufacturer today could have anything between 10 to 50 suppliers throughout their supply chain, right? And each operating distinct security practices, like I mentioned, different HSMs, different key storage mechanism, entirely outside the OEM's visibility. Now, without a centralized or a unified control, the automotive OEMs cannot effectively govern the security posture of these components, right? They cannot enforce consistent policies or coordinate cryptographic operations across the supplier ecosystem. And that results in a patchwork of disconnected trust domains that the OEM inherits by default. And all this without the audit rights or revocation authority or even policy enforcement capabilities, right? So it's a fundamental breakdown in the OEM's ability to own its own cryptographic trust, right? Now, the second issue that we would like to highlight is really the limited life cycle traceability that you see here on the screen. So when suppliers control key generation and signing, OEMs often lack the complete records of which keys were issued, when certificates will expire, who performed the signing operations, and what firmware versions were signed by which keys. Now, what that points to is that the audit trails are also fragmented across supplier systems with no unified logging or tamper-proof provenance records. Now, imagine if there is an incident. So, during the incident response or root cause analysis, after the security incidents, or even compliance audits with all these new regulations coming in, OEMs must request cryptographic evidence from each supplier, which introduces delays, inconsistent documentation quality, and potential audit gaps. And the whole process is slower and less reliable. Even from a regulatory standpoint, and James will talk a little bit more on the regulation piece, but from a regulatory standpoint, ISO PAS 5112, which is the 214324 audit framework, explicitly requires end-to-end traceability and cryptographic change control, right? And all what I spoke of in terms of a distributed supplier control makes it very, very complex. Now comes the manual production workflows. Key and certificate provisioning on the manufacturing lines still remains largely human-driven in many facilities, relying on technicians. We've seen portable media being used to transport keys, even emails, manual HSM operations, and that really introduces errors, creates insider threat exposure, and creates throughput bottlenecks that could worsen as production volumes increase. And what we've seen is, all these connected car volumes actually going up, or the proportion of connected car going up within that particular production volume. Now here, automation actually becomes an imperative, right? And automation is not just about efficiency gains anymore. It is a security requirement which eliminates human handling of cryptographic materials that represents one of the most significant risk factors in the production environment, right? So automation reduces manual e-handling, eliminates the risk of human errors, and really removes dependency on specialized internal tooling. And what it also provides for is a real-time audit enablement, which directly improves both the security posture and the manufacturing efficiency. So without automation, scaling key provisioning to support all these new production demands, especially in scenarios where you have 100 plus ECUs in these connected vehicles, forces OEMs to choose between throughput constraints or unacceptable security compromises. So that brings me to the fourth one, which is delay, revocation, or certificate rotation, right? So cyber attacks now is not about if, but about when they would happen. And the first things OEM need to do is really, in those kind of scenario, to revoke the credential when faced with a cyber attack or an incident. Now, without the automated OEM-owned revocation capability, responding to a compromised certificate or a supplier CA breach requires coordinated manually across multiple third parties, right? A process that can take weeks or even months. And the security impact is that the extended exposure window allows attackers to exploit known vulnerabilities across the fleet. Now, also from a regulation standpoint, if you look at the R15I156 and even the EU CRA, which is kicking in by December 27, it actually mandates for a rapid demonstrable incident response. So timelines that cannot be met when revocation authority actually sits with the supplier than with the OEM. So security events that could have been contained through immediate automated revocation if it was with the OEM can now escalate into large-scale recalls or even service campaigns with the full financial and reputational landing on the OEM, regardless of what the or where the cryptographic failure actually originated, right? Now, last but probably the most critical bit, which you see on the right here, is the regulatory exposure. We have all these new regulations. Some of them kicked in 2024, which is the R155156, which again refers back to 21434, and now we have the EU CRA. And they actually require OEMs to maintain a cybersecurity management system and a software update management system with auditable control over update signing and cryptographic integrity. Now, these requirements already apply to all newly produced vehicles in regulated markets since July 2024 in about 60 countries. Now, looking ahead, and especially for OEMs who export or manufacture in Europe, the European Cybersecurity Resilience Act further strengthens this by mandating that the cryptographic agility secured by default configuration and continuous patching is a requirement, right? Closer home, we're talking of India's AIS 189 and 190, which we are expecting sometime soon. And in that, the regulators expect the OEMs to demonstrate active cybersecurity control across the life cycle rather than delegating responsibilities to suppliers, right? Now, the challenge is that many OEMs still operate in this fragmented supplier-controlled key infrastructure. This really creates, like I mentioned, compliance, financial and strategic risk from type approval delays to regulatory penalties to increasing audit scrutiny and potential market access restriction and even reputational damage. So in simple terms, and just to sum it up, like how Paul said, cryptographic key ownership is no longer just a security issue. It has become a regulatory requirement and all about automotive trust. So with that, I give it back to Paul.
Some great insight there. Next up, I'd like to welcome Vikesh Chowdhury, CEO of HackersEra. HackersEra is a leading Pune-based cybersecurity company specializing in automotive security and ethical hacking services. So Vikesh will walk us through a cybersecurity from a potential attacker's view.
Thank you, Paul. So, every time I talk on automotive or cybersecurity, most of the time I talk offensive in offensive way. So, no, the perspective here is, if let's say if you will not understand the attacker's point of view, you will be not able to secure a product in depth. So that is my perspective when whenever we can think on any cybersecurity point of view on a vehicle or a controllers. So first of all, I will not going to talk about regulation compliance policy. For that, I think we have Amit and we have other peoples on a board to discuss. I will only throughout this 10 to 15 minutes of the journey, I will talk on how the key management is very crucial infrastructure decisions for a OEM. So this will be my point of view to share on a key management issues. So what I'm going to show you in this 5 to 10 minutes, how a attacker can do weak key provisioning, issue cloning, aftermarket security issues. You must have heard about a lot of vehicle theft, and how it's happening, the vehicle theft. It's not like there are few attacks which is on a radio frequency, but there are few attacks are happening because of keys, because keys are already in a public domain, keys are already on a dark web, keys are already on a marketplace where you pay it and you buy the key. So so the as Amit said very clearly that because of fragmentations of keys management, let's say you have about 50 suppliers, and 50 suppliers, then there may be contract-based suppliers also, let's say tier 2 suppliers within these 50 ecosystem suppliers. So you see how keys are traversing from one place to another, and then it comes to OEMs. If single source, from a single source, if the keys got leaked, it will impact of your complete vehicle, complete fleet. So my point of view is here to how we can make it structural, make it process in terms of key management. So this is one of the very good line. What I say, the attacker doesn't break cryptographies. AES is secure, RSA is secure. Okay, what attacker breaks is a process. If there is no process established in an OEM place, there is no meaning to have a AES 128 or AES 256, because you don't have a process first of all. So in the first process, whether the keys has been generated, whether the keys is truly randomly, first of all, this would be our first question, whether the keys is randomly or not. Then how the keys is stored, whether it is stored on a plain text, on a server, on a cloud, on a key management application. This could be our first second process breakthrough. The third could be how it is transporting from suppliers to the OEMs, whether it is a safe channels or whether it you just share over emails or share over different social channels, and then the other people integrate into their component. So this could be one of the process breakdown issues. Fourth is authorization issues, like who can access these keys. So if it is accessed by, let's say, anonymous public users, then there is a problem. So, and how fast you can, if it's a keys is compromised as an OEM, how fast you can, let's say, rotate the keys. So these are the process breaks basically. Because as a hacker's point of view, my goal is to not break a cryptography. My goal is to break the process that you have implemented, or there is a gap in a process. In our insight, I'm just sharing my insights. We have worked almost 180 plus ECU. The cryptography as there is correct, but the access controls, like who can access the keys, that is missing. So for examples, in a component, there are debug ports. There are, let's say, different microcontrollers, and which have a secure storage also, but somewhere it is leaking the keys. Somewhere in there, storing the, let's say, storing in an EEPROM memory, and that EEPROM anyone can read it. So you have the keys, but anyone can also access it. So this is a way we can break the process of storing the keys. Then I'll give you a few scenario which will clear the audience that why it is important to have a key management life cycle. I would say, because the vehicle life cycle is a 15 years, so we should have we have to maintain from the generations of keys to the end of life cycle of a key. We have to maintain securely. We have to keep. We have to process. We have to transit all those keys securely. We have to manage those keys. So the first scenario is the weak key provisioning. This is what I'm going to talk on, the weak key provisioning. Let's say you have a very good process now. You're generating keys, you're generating storage, you're transporting in a very good way, and then the key injection is also established process. But when the key generation happening, you are using let's say CRC 16 or CRC 8, CRC 32. It's a weak key provisioning basically. It's a weak random number generator. So this is where the cryptography will work. Let's say we need the keys to be unique on every reset, every hardware reset. We need on every, let's say, without reset also, we need the keys to be unique. Second, the problem is if it's a storage in let's say plain text, or if it's to getting a storage and let's say EEPROM or EEPROM memory, if some people can read it, it will expose to entire fleet basically. It will impact the entire fleet, so that because of the weak key provisioning, the entire fleet will be affected. Third is some key across entire production batch. Let's say same key, if you are using a same key for entire production batch, and if one issue compromise means thousands of compromise. So this could be one one of the weak key provisioning issues. And so we have seen keys transported on USB drives also between suppliers and factories. That is one of the keys we wanted to say. Okay, so second scenario I wanted to highlight on the issue cloning. So you must have heard that your infotainment systems are also on aftermarkets. So people are buying OEMs issue on aftermarket issue, and basically aftermarket place. Like I would not name any platform right now. This is not a good place where you can buy or hacker can buy the issue, but the issue cloning is not a theory; it's really happening. How? Um, the attacker extract key from one physical issue, and then they uh, they they ship the same thing on a, let's say, the same microcontroller, the same build chip, and then they sell on a let's say illegal marketplace. So the goal is here is the business impact is counterfeit is issue in aftermarket undermine the brand trust, because what if there will be a backdoor in it, but it's getting sell under your name as a OEM name because you have not provisioned your key properly. Thus, you allowed basically to have a counterfeit in a market. If you will provision your keys, there will be no counterfeit in the market. So this is one of the argument that I want to pose here, basically. So so basically, the counterfeit issues in aftermarket may undermine the brand trust that you have built in so many years for a OEM. And second is, every issue need the unique cryptographic identity, like per device, not per batch. So why per device? Because let's say, and there should be a validation properly also in a vehicle, and let's say in a PKI KMS server. So if even let's say if it's a counterfeit, if it will get validated on certain level. So this could be one way to look into it, the issue cloning scenarios. Okay, this is one of the examples. You must have heard the latest news on, let's say, OEM have a lot of impact on the manufacturing, where sometimes they inject the keys. So supply chain is the largest attack surface that we all agree, I guess, because you basically let's say, let's walk the chain of how from the supply chain that your keys get leaked. You have OEM key server, then there's a tier one, then there's a contract manufacturer, then there's a logistic, then there's a production line. And these supply chains, you cannot, as an OEM, you cannot protect the contractual manufacturers' portals, because they may have their own way to provision the keys right now. If let's say if it's not a unified single source of key lifecycle manager. If it's let's say multiple fragmented key lifecycle manager, then as an OEM, you cannot guarantee that my keys are secure, because this is the process, but I'm sharing with my suppliers. So most of the times, the keys are getting leaked from supplier side. I mean, I would not say the suppliers are leaking it. Basically, there are some vulnerabilities into their platform, their, let's say, servers or anywhere. From there, it is getting leaked. So we have to ask these questions to each. Does the tier one who has access to keys, is it audited or is it logged in? Is it logging all the who is accessing the keys, from where it is accessing it? So as an OEM, you should have this. Then the contract manufacturer, what physical security they have to manage the keys? Can someone walk with USB and copy the keys from the centralized server or somewhere? Logistic issues, like as issues treated as security sensitive assets or just another components. The production line, are injections stations isolated, or it is a general one, like anyone can access it, or there is no separate network, there is no audit trails are there. The question is not whether your keys are strong, whether your supply chain treats them as the most sensitive asset in the vehicles. So this is one of the very big line, I would say. The OEM have to think on this line. Whether your supply chain treats them as the most sensitive asset in the vehicle or not. If you think that your keys are not the most sensitive asset, then you are on wrong track, basically. So every handoff in the supply chain is a potential leakage point. This is the summary of scenario 3. This is what I wanted to say. Okay. Another, I have a couple of prepared scenarios. If I'm taking a long time, please interrupt me. So another scenario is lateral movement via certificate misuse. So just imagine the attacker compromised TCU certificate. Now from TCU certificate, we can penetrate the OTA server basically, because we have the certificate. We can query the AWS, we can query to Azure, we can query to the storage buckets where the firmware are located. And we can also publish the firmwares, the backdoor firmware with the, let's say, the bypassed signatures firmware, which will be accepted by the end components. Then the TCU trusted by gateway issue, because gateway attacker access internal canvas, gateway trust TCU messages and commands to the BCM or the other issues. So root cause is there is no revocation mechanism. Attacker inherit lot of entire ecosystems. Business risk is without certificate management. A single breach cannot be contained. It cascades. So the certificates are like a trust anchors. When one is compromised with no revocations, the attacker inherits the trust of the entire ecosystems. So that means you don't have to just look at the one component perspective. You need to also check the other ecosystem that they are utilizing the keys and certificate. For example, your TCU, your V2X, your cloud applications, your cloud all should have a proper digital identity. Basically, the unique digital identity, first of all, that who can access what keys at what level. And the keys should be bind with a digital identity. This is what my thought process are there. Yes. The next one is, the similar lines, the OTA update hijack. I just talk, how it can be hijacked. If we are able to access from, let's say we got the certificate, we can penetrate the storage bucket, and a storage bucket, we can update our own campaign, the OTA campaign, then everything is compromised. So this is one of the case studies we have already done in the past multiple times in our test scenarios, this kind of activities. So this is from experience we are sharing with you. And the measure time, the key is extracted from the diagnostic port, because if you not think that all the interfaces of vehicles should be secured, the attack vectors are huge. In automotive, attack vectors are huge, from cloud, from TCU, from Bluetooth, from Wi-Fi, from V2X, from radio frequencies, from OBD2 port, from CAN. We can also extract the keys. For example, let's say you have not secured, let's say, the read memory by address, which is the issue. We can read certain memories from the components, and then we can also read the certificate. We can also read the keys from memory. So you have the keys, but you have we have not secured the let's say services which will prevent reading the issue memory. Then there is a problem. So most of the times we have observed that we are able to read HSM keys, we are able to read secure boot keys, we are able to read other OEM keys, which is the intellectual property of OEM, from using the read memory by address, or read memory by scalability address, or read memory read DID. So so basically what is here, the attack, what attacker needs here is just access to ECU, and if there is no access control, we can read certain things from memory. So physical access plus weak UDS security are keyed up. So this is in single line we wanted to say. Then I think Amit have already talked on this, that expired and revoked certificates. Basically, if let's say if it is expired, the certificates, so the most dangerous certificates are those whose one you forget, basically. So let's say you have created this generated certificate, but you forgot that certificate to manage it later, and it is, let's say, not used, unrevoked, or expired certificates, which might also reveal sensitive informations. So it's not like if it's expired you cannot do other things. For example, you can see the supplier relationship ends, contract terminated, or company acquired, but your keys are already there with them. Supplier certificates were never revoked in the vehicle PKI. Attacker obtains old supplier credentials, breach inside a dark web. There are a lot of ways. The old certificate is still trusted by vehicle fleet. So this is one of the case study that we wanted to say. So if the keys are expired, or let's say you have certain things to, then you need to revoke that certificate. So the ghost certificate, we call it, as a hacker's point of view or attacker's point of view, we call it as a ghost certificate, the most dangerous kind, because nobody is watching for them. Okay. Then the one case study is a shared key access across vehicle programs, like OEM reuse same root key or master secret across multiple vehicle programs. It should not be, ideal best practice. Basically, you should have a unique master key or OEM key for every variant, every vehicles. So the key reuse across vehicles program is the automotive equivalent of using the same password everywhere. If one password got leaked, your entire account got leaked. So this is one of the case we wanted to share on this scenario. Then HSM bypass via debug interface. I just gave you one scenario on HSM side, and HSM is only as secure as the system around it. Security, researcher, expensive but ineffective basically. So if your keys are getting leaked from HSM region, we are able to read the memory by, let's say, read memory or by JTAG or by UART or SWD. Then there is no meaning of having HSM. Okay, so this is one of the interesting case studies which you want. Let's say all over the globe there are, right now the things like the V2X is going to implement. So when V2X, then there should be, let's say, a centralized V2X exchange keys. There, from, let's say, regional, there will be from India, there may be from certain, or from let's say different audit agency body or ministry, there will be the V2X exchange. So that means your PKI certificates, basically the V2X will rely completely on the PKI certificates for trusted between the vehicles, because from one manufacturer to another manufacturer vehicle, how they can coordinate with each other through some infrastructure, which is a V2I and I2V. Now, if I am a supplier and I got registered into that systems, and from my side, if the keys get leaks, I can also penetrate at certain levels. So attacker forgets or force on a steal V2X enrollment certificates, basically spoofed vehicle broadcast safety message, let's say surrounding vehicles react to false data. So this could be one scenario could happen if the keys are not protected from each manufacturer, basically. So the V2X is the future of road safety, which every government claims, because they can do the early signs between each vehicles. But without managing certificate infrastructures, it becomes the futures of road attacks. So, so this is, this because of, it's all depend on the how you are storing the keys, where you are securing it, how you are managing the entire life cycle. If you missed by one point, it will lead a fatal on the road. So now from my point of view, because I'm talking on the attacker side, where you need to invest, so every attack scenario which I shown today is, preventable. First of all, it's like all preventable. This is not a technology problem. This is an architectural decision that we need to take today, in terms of securing the keys. So we should have a centralized key cycle management, basically. And as I said, as Amit was saying, that every scenario tests back to one root cause: fragmented, unmanaged key life cycles. So that we need to take care. So thank you for listening me. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has.
Thanks, Vikesh. I think what you touched on there, the wrong key strategy leaves too many doors open.
Yes. Yes.
And it's quite scary, especially the last piece, as we look at that and think we're racing towards the connected, interconnected car world, and people should think twice before they indiscriminately let cars take control and communicate. Perfect. Thank you very much. I'd like to now hand over to James Penny, CTO of Device Authority. James is going to discuss some of the approaches and considerations and how to mitigate risk, both existing and as they evolve.
Sure, happy to. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great stuff. So I'm just going to slide along here. So there's a, actually, we have an existing solution in this area, and unsurprisingly, is really designed to tackle a lot of the things that Vikas has been talking about. I think you made some really good points and really important points, actually, in what he was talking about. But we specifically at Device Authority, so we have a platform called Keyscaler, and really it's designed to tackle a lot of the problems that Vikas was really outlining there. So from a manufacturer's perspective, I mean, what we're actually looking at, it's quite a simplified diagram, but I'll just walk through it first, and then I'll explain how some of the pieces come together to help, I think, solve some of those challenges. But the system effectively has a set of controls and solutions around it that augment HSM processes. So the actual solution set, we call it as HSM Access Controller, and what it means is that it makes it very simple to integrate and utilize functions that you would typically call an HSM for within this platform via REST APIs and things like that. Within that feature set, or that solution set, actually is a feature that we created called secure data repositories. And it sounds fairly innocuous in its name, but really what it's designed to do is effectively either store whatever you want in a secure manner and make it retrievable at a later time, or generate and store whatever you would like. And when I say generate, I mean keys, effectively. It does focus specifically on keys. So we're talking about asymmetric key pairs. We're talking about symmetric keys for the likes of JTAG interfaces and the debug interfaces that Vikas was talking about. And to do that at scale and in a policy controlled manner. So to sort of, I guess, walk through the end-to-end process here, and not every step is necessary every single time. It depends, everything gets manufactured slightly differently and people have different processes, but we really are trying to stop people from putting a bunch of keys on a USB stick and walking them between stations. But it might start with an admin, either uploading keys that it's already received as a customer. I might say, I need you to make me these the 100,000 components, and these are the exact keys that I've already aligned to these. I pre-generated them, hopefully in a secure place, and these have all got assigned serial numbers or VIN numbers and things like that already assigned to all of these keys. So I need you to take that and put it in. Now that package can be encrypted to the system owner's public key, and it will only be decrypted and processed and then loaded into the system and then effectively made available later on. And I'll explain how that also works. But alternative to that, you can also pre-generate a bunch of keys. So if, for example, in a high demand manufacturing scenario, what you might end up doing is actually having a buffer zone of 50,000, maybe 100,000 keys at any given time in any given factory that allows you to continue to operate. If there's any kind of underlying infrastructure problem or something like that, and it prevents necessarily having to generate a key every time if we can securely pre-generate using true random number generator as the seed, as Vikas was pointing out, for that key generation, and store them securely. We can have this sort of inventory of keys that we can pull in during our manufacturing process. But they can be pre-generated and pre-uploaded, or they can be generated on demand. So as the manufacturing process is running, we can just say, hey, I need a symmetric key for that this particular device with this VIN number or serial number or any kind of underlying metadata. And then throughout that process, you can see here the sort of middle of the line and the end of the line stations can actually, like I said, make requests. So I'm handling this device with this serial number or this VIN number. I need a symmetric key for this purpose. I need an asymmetric key for that purpose. I need whatever it might be, a certificate X509 signed by the CA, things like that. And those can all be generated or signed in some cases if you're doing on-device key generation using this particular system, and then handed back to the EOL or the MOL, put into the device, it goes along. If it gets touched by additional systems or additional parts of the manufacturing process, all of those chain of events come together to create an audit trail of the key material for that particular device that's being manufactured. So you have every single, when it was generated, which station and who actually which station was able to access that key. So to Vikash's point, understanding who's had access to your keys and at what times and is a very important metric. And if you can't always prevent people from doing it, because every system it's tough to make them absolutely watertight. You might have privileged access abuse and things like that. If you can't necessarily prevent it all the time, the next best thing is to have the audit trail of exactly who did what and when, so that can be reviewed and used as evidence in a compliance process or a regulatory process. So all of those daisy chains of events to get the key onto that device are completely tracked and logged and audited. And what we really set out to do with the solution is to, and again, to touch on some of the points that Vikesh was saying, is to get away from manual processes, get away from fragmented key generation processes, and allow you to really almost centralize these either within a factory or at a global scale. So actually, the number of use cases this is deployed to have multiple factories globally. And you actually have every single interaction with the system in the factories being replicated back up to the data centers for central visibility by, central either service owners or security principals within the organization, so that they can have complete visibility of not only what's going on in the factory, but also what's going on in every factory from a single perspective. The whole system does also, of course, enforce policies and permissions. So, if you have a manufacturing line that's supposed to be producing a particular set of devices or devices for a specific customer, they will not be able to, get cross visibility to other product lines or other customer lines, which is, again, incredibly important in terms of making sure that people are not accessing things that they should not do. In the case of these keys that are being put in these devices. In that global scenario, those factories do also support a completely offline sort of production use. So what I mean by that is factories don't always have the best connectivity capabilities, and it would be a very silly thing to do to have to halt production every single time a factory didn't have necessarily connectivity to the data centers or connectivity to the internet. So each factory in this case can make full use of these sort of end-to-end capabilities offline, and effectively sync all of that data or resync all of that data once the factory has come back online and got a good stable connection, so that again we get visibility within the central sort of global authority of an organization of all the keys and everything that all the audit events that happened. So if I can find my mouse. There we go. I found it. So yeah, this is actually what I'm referring to. And this actually is a real customer of ours. There are numerous factories deployed globally. I believe some in the Indian region. I believe there's the Americas. There's deployed in China too, if I'm not mistaken, where they can effectively sync up all of their global factory operations into a one centralized point to give them that visibility and that auditability. So you'll see here there's almost like a central commanding Keyscaler instance, typically being a data center. You might have that globally redundant as well. And then each factory there is fitted out with a Keyscaler instance that can handle all of the key generation, the permission enforcement, the policy management. And actually each factory has its own set of keys. So even, you know, one factory trying to load the keys of another factory would be absolutely impossible, even if they got access to, let's say, the database that was storing all of the data within that system. You would still need to be bound to the HSM, and then obviously within the HSM, as Vikesh was actually pointing out, is only as good as the controls around it, really. So, you know, having the appropriate security and controls in place for those HSMs also helps abuse of those key storage locations. So yes, global deployments absolutely supported, with customers doing hundreds of millions of keys. This particular solution, again, with full audit tracing and auditability and external visualizations into their own dashboards and their own figures, and you know, maintaining a decent uptime, I believe.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you want to cover a piece on the regulatory alignment?
I was just going to say, so I mean, all the things we're sort of talking about, just to I guess provide a summary. You know, the regulatory frameworks. I mean, there seems at the moment it feels like there's more that I find out about every single week, depending on who you're talking to. But I think we've talked about them at length in this particular webinar. But R155 and R156 are obviously common within conversations that a lot of people are having. I think the latest one that seems to be the hottest is the Cyber Resilience Act. Now that I think a few organizations have discovered that either applies to them or that it exists in the first place. So, you know, in that sort of changing landscape, there's not necessarily the most prescriptive controls sometimes, but, you know, what we're trying to outline here is that it is possible to operate within those and establish the right processes around device identity, around key management, you know, not just on the device, but all the way up until the device is actually in the wild is also incredibly important, as well as the sort of aftercare. So, yeah, so there's a lot to take in depending on which frameworks you're aligning to, but it is possible, and obviously working with the likes of Vikesh, who helps give you that viewpoint from the attacker's perspective and with his expertise and you know, solutions like ours, I believe we can make it a lot easier to achieve.
Great, and thanks for that insight, James. You know, as organizations struggle with the connect something all the way to the connect everything, and wrap around that this rapidly evolving regulatory set of frameworks, sometimes it feels like there is a mountain to climb, and when you look around, it's just you know, and it's, where do I start? You know, how do I climb this? Well, good climbers don't climb alone. They have partners that know the landscape, know what to do. And you know, Device Authority has formulated and built what they're calling the POV program, the Proof of Value program, and that is to help customers start that important part of the journey where they've evolved beyond the concept, and how do they make it real for them. So being able to demonstrate that you can achieve all of those requirements through a program, you know, that you are compliant ready with the things that affect you today. There is policy and enforcement that maintains a strong posture, taking out human hands. And we've talked a lot about the gaps that exist, and human hands do have an impact to that. In old processes, they're essential. In the new paradigm, they are, in a lot of cases, the weak link. And then, you know, joining the dots between, you know, the program you're trying to build and the actual operational elements of that service and infrastructure that are the doing parts. So our proof of value program is really around making sure you can tick the relevant boxes that you need. It lays against the regulatory frameworks that are important. And James touched on 155, 156, the equivalent of those, as Amit touched on earlier, AIS 189 and 190, all around the management frameworks that govern and the update frameworks that keep it enforced. So So this proof of value program allows you to create some criteria that roll into the business case that allows you to scale as an organization and accelerate the journey to that environment that you need to get to. It's available today. It's a 1-month program. It allows you to showcase the things that are relevant to your business in a model that your organization can buy into and fund and help you scale to the position that you need to be in, relevant to your position in the market, with a service that is adaptable and flexible to meet tomorrow's needs. I sort of summarized in my head the things that we'd talked about across the course of the webinar. Organizations need to take control. They need to be accountable for the things that are directly relevant to them. They're no longer in a position that they can point the finger and say, yeah, but they did that. It wasn't me. They need to build with flexibility in mind, because the landscape is evolving, both from what the ask is and what the enforcement is. So rigid structures leave you adrift. The strategy for OEMs needs to encompass everybody that is part of that provision process. Your supply chain is the most fundamental part of your business. If it's insecure, you are building insecure.
Yes.
Which invariably risks people, brand, and future business. And an acknowledgement and an awareness that what you built yesterday may not be right for where you need to be tomorrow. If you embrace change and you do it in the right way, you can leverage what's there, but adapt it to overcome the hurdles in front of you. So the presentation will be available to everyone at the end of the webinar, along with some collateral that is available through the BrightTalk platform. There's a comprehensive KMS white paper that covers everything that you would need in your journey to something. HackersEra will provide some additional information as well that will be downloadable, as well as a link to our POV program that can help you get a clearer view of what it is that we can provide. So I'd like to move on to some questions that have been posed. I think it's always difficult because there's usually quite a few and you have to try and pick through based on the time available. I'll pick one out here, and probably the best person to pose that to you is you, James. For organizations with complex global supply chains, how can they maintain control of cryptographic keys while allowing suppliers and other manufacturers to participate in their production process? A long one, but hopefully you can pick up the...
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's really about permissions and control. That's a lot of it comes down to, and it's having the right. The problem with permissions is they're only as good as how well they're enforced, and someone inevitably slips by those things. So having the right, I think, cryptographically verifiable processes for key generation as a starting point, as Rakesh was pointing out, is an incredibly important one. But when you start to collaborate, and sort of introduce this sort of global integration or interconnectivity, it's about having the right controls in place and the right, not just cryptographic controls, but like auditability and controls around who's accessing what and whether they should even have access to those things in the first place. So it's definitely an interesting. Well, I guess there's not necessarily one size fits all as well for a lot of these, because people will do things differently as well. So I think it's also about flexibility, because you might want to pre-generate your keys. You might want to take a key bundle and upload it into your systems and then distribute. I want to, I've got 1 million keys, 100,000 goes to that factory, 100,000 goes to that factory, another 100,000 goes to that factory. And those processes can get quite complex, but they don't necessarily have to be, I think, if you have the right system. It gets a lot worse to control, and it gets a lot worse to manage if you're trying to, do everything with scripts on machines and USB sticks, as Vikesh was saying.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, James. There's another one here, which I think is probably for you, Vikesh. From a security testing perspective, what is stopping organizations taking action against the most common vulnerabilities you see in device identity or key management implementations?
Most of the times when you perform a security testings, 60 to 80% times you will find that a door is unlocked, basically. So that means you can access the keys. Now, what is stopping them to have it is, let's say, the hardware change. So for examples, let's say you have an issue right now which doesn't have a HSM, or which doesn't have a lot of security controls in it right now. And if you want to have a complete cybersecurity measures from all point of view, you need to have a secure boot, you need to have HSM, you need to have a the complete fault injection test cases, everything, crypt analysis, and that will not reveal your keys. So then to transform from one microcontroller to from one technology to have a different stacks, different hardware bomb, this is what I feel.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I've got another one here, but I think you sort of covered it, James. But I'll pass it to you. Many organizations understand the theory of secure key management, but struggle to prove compliance. What kind of auditability / traceability should organizations be looking for?
So we did touch on it a few times, but really, I mean, the level is, you don't necessarily always know what level you need until you're trying to clean up the mess of a breach. And then you'll figure out whether it was fit for purpose or not. That's part of the issue. But I mean, verbosity is key, I think. It's important to, I think, you could do a little exercise sometimes about auditability to figure out if you have enough. And that's just pretend that you've been attacked. And then look at existing audit traces that you have and try to see if you could piece together what might have happened based on a given bit of dummy data. If the answer is James accessed a key, but you couldn't say what day or what machine or where that remote control came from or what factory it was in and things like that, then I think you probably have some gaps to fill. So I think there's I mean, more is always better, but I think to get a really good idea, it's good to spend some time either workshopping or exercising internally to figure out what exactly is that you have and how to augment it. It's typically the best way to approach it.
Great.
I just want to add it here. I just want to add one line. So I had one experience where millions of keys were in Excel sheets, and the people were manually managing those keys. Basically, the life cycle of certificate, then expiry, when it's expiring, okay, when you have to renew it. So you see the complex work.
Wow.
That's base zero. That's where you. That's your starting point. You got a big hill to climb, but yeah.
Yeah, well, anything's an improvement from there.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, listen, I want to take the opportunity to thank Amit, James, and Vikesh for their time and presentation. Apologies for the small technical issue at the beginning, which was more me, but it didn't impact the valuable content from our three providers. So thank you, everyone, for dialing in and listening, and for those picking up at a later stage. Thank you for spending the time to watch. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.